here for you. What does as is mean? It means as disclosed, as it's presented, as you go through your due diligence. That's what you're buying. You have to understand that there's a due diligence period, and that's contingency. You have 17 days standard. Sometimes you can waive that if the seller gives you all the disclosures, including inspection reports. I had this discussion yesterday with a client. What it means is that they're not going to do any repairs. The seller is not going to offer or do any repairs or credits or lowering the price or what have you. It's very specific. You have to understand that. And when you do throw that word around, or that meaning as is, it means that you're coming in saying, I'm going to buy this as I see it, as it's been presented to me. It means it could have cracked foundations that the seller doesn't know about. You know, seller is a layman. They're not privy to that. So if the seller didn't get inspections and it has a foundation report for foundation crack or a crack in the pool, or the HVAC is end of life or the roof is end of life, they're not going to tell you that. They don't have the ability to tell you that. So understand that the seller is just saying, I'm not going to do whatever it is. I'm just going to tell you what I've done through the disclosure process. We'll get into that in a second. So what happens if you buy a house and 2 years later you have a door that doesn't work, and then you have an inspector or a contractor come out and he says you have major foundation damage? Well, how are you going to prove that seller knew that? He just thought, it just kind of happens, never really paid attention to it. It's a thing that can happen. It absolutely happens, right? You can find out if he's tried to hide cracks or patched it up or what have you. But then the onus is on you to prove that he has done those repairs, not the previous owner or what have you, right? So, and as is seller still needs to meet minimum state and federal disclosure standards. There's something called an SBQ and a TDS, and we have a whole slew of different things. And I always get grief about, oh my God, this is so tenuous. It's such a pain in the ass. Why do I have to do all this? Well, because it's your duty as a seller to disclose every material fact that you know about that house. Everything that you've ever done to the house. You've replaced the floors, you've polished the floors, you've replaced switches, you've replaced lights, you've moved plumbing around. You have to disclose everything. You have to disclose everything that you've done. That's the minimum state and federal disclosures. And through lawsuits of 125 years of doing this, we've had disclosures upon disclosures upon disclosures that fit pretty much everything. Not everything, but pretty much everything. Okay? And it's your duty as a seller to disclose everything that you know that's materially wrong with that house or that's been repaired on that house. As a buyer, your job and your duty in contractual terms is to read all the disclosures, all the inspections, the prelim, all the reports, everything that comes your way, because it's your job to unearth everything that might scare you away from that house. Because once you bought it and it's been disclosed and you didn't catch it and you didn't read it, shame on you. Well, it's not carpe diem, it's buyer beware. Factors you should consider before buying an as-is house. If you're thinking about buying something as is, you need to consider a few things. Same thing with a car, right? You can have a car inspected before you buy it, but once you buy it and you didn't have it inspected, and they didn't take it out and run it a few miles and find out that there's a transmission issue, then that's on you, right? First, it's possible the home isn't livable in its current state. Okay, so what happens if the house isn't livable? Well, you're still buying it as is. What happens if it has no cabinet, no kitchen, no plumbing, no electrical? Somebody let's say the sellers moved out and somebody came in and stole the copper pipes underneath the house. It's happened to me before. Oh, okay. we didn't know about it. We'll take care of it. It's surmountable if you catch it during the transaction, but if you catch it afterwards, that's on you as the buyer, right? An appraiser is going to come in and do their own inspection to look for anything that's out of whack, right? And depending on the type of loan, if it's a conventional, it's going to be a pretty light inspection. But if it's FHA or VA or USDA, they're going to come in and make sure that there's certain habitability requirements. Example, running water, electricity, heating, cooling, a kitchen, a stove, that type of stuff has to be in that house working and operable. So a VA appraisal is going to be a lot more in depth because the appraiser is going to have to look at that. They're also going to look at like the CO detectors and the carbon monoxide detectors and the smoke detectors and all that other. CO and carbon monoxide are the same thing, but the smoke detectors, making sure that they're in working order because that's part of their job. The straps around the water heater and, certain things that have to be done. Those are minimum state guidelines in California or minimum property requirements. So conventional loan, not insured or guaranteed by the federal government. So yeah, I'm not going to get into that. Getting a home inspection. So let's say that you're buying a house as is and the seller did not do inspections and you're buying it as is. You still have the right and duty to do an inspection. You still have that ability. But understand the seller's probably not going to do any repairs that you might find. So you're just buying what you understand is an as-is house and it has a cracked foundation. You're pretty much stuck buying it, right? As is gets into a legal mumbo jumbo. That means you might have to go to court while you're in contract saying, hey, I found this foundation repair. I still want to buy this house. I think the seller should buy it. But you wrote in your contract saying as is. So what's the judge going to say? An inspection is not required. It's highly suggested because what it does is it lowers the barrier to entry, the fear factor for the buyer. And I know sometimes you get heated and I get the gruff too, because typically it's $1,000, $1,500 for inspections. You can get a property inspection, a termite inspection, foundation or chimney inspection, a pool inspection, all that stuff. It has to go into there and you have to do it. And if you have septic or propane or water well or well water, you have to have those inspected as well, because you need to be able to present that to the buyer and let them know what they're buying. And what happens if the seller isn't doing that? Well, that's on the buyer to decide if they're going to do that. It's optional, but I always make my sellers pay for it because it's just a lot easier. My job is to make your transaction as smooth as possible. And if you come up against me and make this a brick wall saying, I don't want to do inspections, well, don't cry when they come back and say there's $30,000 worth of termite repair. We're getting out. Or you can help pay for it, or you can pay for it, or you can credit it, right? Even though it's as is. So just understand that. Partial as is doesn't mean the entire thing is what? Yeah, so it could be certain things like the pool. There's certain things that are wrong with the house. You could say, I'm not going to warranty this, but you could put that in the disclosures as well. You can say, hey, my pool has a massive crack in it. It's probably cheaper to just tear it out than to have it repaired. Yeah, it's about the same. For example, a seller can list a property as is, but only referencing certain parts, sheds, garage, broken pools. Must have read that before. So you need to ask the seller exactly what they're referring to. It's kind of like the same thing as warranties. There's exclusionary and inclusionary warranties. And what you want to find are the exclusionary ones to know what you're buying. If it's a warranty, like even on a car, what does it not cover? So I know what I am paying for. Does it not cover the powertrain? Does it not cover the electrical? Does it not cover wear and tear? Right? Same thing with this. You're buying a resale house. Even a new house isn't going to be perfect. Just take that into consideration. Required disclosures. There's still required disclosures that the seller has to present the buyer. The TDS, SPQ, and I can tell you what that is. You just have to ask. But there's a bunch of other ones that are there. Unless you're doing a trustee situation where you're selling your parents' house because they've passed on, you're taking it over, you're the trustee, you're selling off your estate, and you haven't lived there, so you don't know what's wrong with the house. You haven't lived there in the past 2 or 3 years, so you can't say that, well, I don't know what's wrong with the house. If you know something that's materially wrong with it, like, oh, that heater doesn't work, it hasn't worked in 30 years, it hasn't worked since I left the house, you have to disclose that, right? But you're not statutorily required by law in California to produce a TDS or SPQ. If you do repairs on the house, then that opens you up to litigation. So you should cover yourself with the SPQ and TDS and fully disclose what you've done, with or without a contractor, licensed or not, with or without permits. Totally up to you how to do that, but that's how we talk about that. There you go. All right, 12 minutes. That was a long dissertation. So with that being said, I'm going to skip some stuff to get into it. Los Gatos House of the Week, not my listing. Hernandez Ave, not my listing. $4 million, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 2,300 square feet, built in 1915. This thing's 110 years old. And I chose it because it's walking distance to downtown Main Street. And got the box brownie background. A lot of front. You guys, you only need 1 or 2 pictures. You don't need 10 pictures. Go right into what matters, like the kitchen and the living room and the trim. I think we've talked about this one already. This one looks familiar. This is beautiful. Love the floor plans. Thank you for doing floor plans. All right, list price reduction. This is the list price reduction of the week. This is McKean Road. The reason why I picked is I have a client that's looking for this, but only in Gilroy area. $2.5 million, not my listing. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,200 square feet, built in 1975, and it's right by Clara Dam. So there you go. Let's take a look at some of these pictures. There's a whole whopping 12 of them. Not much to look at. But you got a garage, kitchen, and let's see what the original price was. 2.9 down to 2.5. There you go. All right, and then these are the highs and lows of Santa Clara County for this week. And Quinn Hill Ave, Los Altos, not my listing, sold for 100% because it didn't have a list price. They sold it off market. This is dangerous because you don't ever really know what you're buying or what the market will present. It could have been $8.5 million, but again, sometimes people don't want to put their house on market, and they want to sell it to somebody that they know, and they use an agent to help them do the paperwork. It's a pretty house. Let's see the low. 34th Street is the lowest priced sold house in Santa Clara County this week, and it's right by 101 and 280, 680 in the Pink Elephant. 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,290 square feet, 6,500 square foot lot, built in 1955. Not much to look at. You're basically buying the lot. Ooh. Wow, that's some marketing right there. That sold for over listing price, so you never know. And that's it right there. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Vito with Abitano. We'll see you out there.